Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to this video. I read this book, the Quran, as a white Christian, and it took me 240 pages to convert to Islam, to become a Muslim. Alhamdulillah. And in this short video, I want to explain to you what I thought this book is or is about. So my expectations before I read the Quran, as well as what it turned out to be and what I turned out to find in here, because those two things differed a lot. So yeah, let's just get straight into the video. First, before I read the Quran, I had a lot of misconceptions. I thought this book tells you that it's okay to rip off non-Muslims, that you should stone everybody, and I thought you need a lot of context to understand that, or so it makes sense. I thought this is something of the past. I thought it's outdated and probably not a good fit for the life today. That's what I thought, because these verses in the Quran were received around 1400 years ago, which is quite some time. So those were my expectations before, and then I expected it to be harsh, to be really strict, too strict, and too extreme maybe. Those were my expectations up front. And I thought that because it's such a big book, it's like 1000 something pages, 1100. Of course, this is with the English translation, so if you only have the Arabic or only have the English, it's probably less pages. But I thought there's so much different stuff in here, so many different learnings and lessons. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of learnings and lessons in here, but the way this book is structured is that also a lot of stuff is repeated. So for example, when I started to read, then after some time there was something I thought, hey, this was already in there, I already read that. So I asked and researched, or I asked ChatGPT, hey, why this is double? So and then I started to understand that, okay, look, how this book is built is there are some core learnings, some core stories, and those are repeated again and again and again, because that's how humans learn. Humans learn from repetition, not from saying one thing one time. That's why so many times in here the core lessons are repeated. The core lessons, for example, that there is resurrection, that you will basically be resurrected after you die at the day of judgment, that there is punishment for the people who do bad things in life, and there's reward for the people who do good things in life. So yeah, that's what I learned when I read. Okay, and it makes a lot of sense, because as I said, that's how humans learn, through repetition. And also the stories in here that are mentioned or explained and so on are repeated multiple times and from different angles, so you always learn something else from the same story, which is quite interesting. So yeah, I started to read, and first, maybe that's also something which was a misunderstanding or misconception before. I thought those three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are totally different. They believe all in one God, but I thought it's different gods and they have different names, and I thought it's three different things. So when I read the Quran, I understood, okay, no, this is the same God. And that's also what my Muslim friends or my Muslim surrounding told me before, hey, look, it's the same. But I didn't really understand it that time. But when I read the Quran, I 100% understood it, because how it made sense for me and how it is explained is that, look, God gave different revelations to different people at different times. So first through Moses and the Torah to the Jews, then through the Gospels to Jesus, and then later with the Quran to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's what I then understood and what made sense. So it's an ongoing thing with Muhammad as the last prophet, peace be upon him, and not this three different gods, what I expected to find or thought before. And yeah, then I started to read, and of course there are a lot of good learnings in here. And now, after I read the whole book, I would say that there are some core lessons, and those are really, really made clear. And those are, of course, the virtues of being a good person, of living a good life, that you should be good to your parents, that you should be fair, honest, how to be a good Muslim, how to be a good person, essentially, and that you should basically know that there's something after this life which is far, far greater, which is far, far more important, and that this life here is merely a play, an illusion. And also it makes sense logically, because if you ask old people, they say, for example, my grandparents, they say, hey, look, this life, it felt so fast, and they're still alive. So, but for them, it felt so fast how this time went by. So if we look at the bigger picture, and I always ask myself before, okay, but what comes after? It makes sense that this is just like a quick thing here on Earth. Also, the older you become, probably you realize that the faster time feels. You think, oh, wait, that was last year, but actually it was like 10 years ago, some events, which is crazy. So yeah, that made a lot of sense. Then I found it extremely profound when it comes especially to how the world is described. So the Quran many times uses examples of nature, of the world, and they are really, really profound examples. I just named some of them. So for example, it is mentioned that God created everything in pairs. Like, for example, nature is created in pairs, animals are created in pairs, and so on. Even sun and moon are pairs. So if you think deeply about it, first it sounds maybe like something obvious, but if you think deeply about it, it's true. Everything is created in pairs. There's sweet and sour. So whenever whatever it comes to, that's how the world is built. Then there are examples named as, look, if you don't believe in resurrection, just look at the nature. A flower grows, it dies, and the next year it comes again. So you see in the nature how resurrection works, how everything comes, then dies, and then comes again. And that's also what will happen after death, that you will be resurrected, and you will be judged, of course. And then there are examples of, hey, look, you think you are in control, but you can't even control the water that you drink every day, which is true, because if the rain stops, we don't have water anymore. I mean, nowadays we can filter the ocean, but back then it was a total different thing. And it is emphasized a lot that humans are or think that they are in control. And that's also what I really learned, and what became clear for me when I read the Quran. Hey, look, I think I'm in control, and I wanted to be in control of everything all my life. But then when I read this book, it basically tells you, hey, you are not in control. You don't control anything. If you plant something in the ground, what do? Did you put this information in the small seed, so the small seed knows how the plant should later look like? Did you put the things in the soil or the rain that give the plant everything to grow? No, you just put a seed. The rest God does. So you just put a small effort, but the big outcome is always with God, with Allah. And we humans, we can just do so much. We can look that we have the right intentions, that we give our best, but still we should always ask for God to allow us the result at the end, or to grant us the result or provision, how it's called in here, at the end, because we are just not in control. And that's also okay, because we're just humans, but we should not fall into this illusion that we are so cool and we control everything and we are so strong, because we are not. That's basically what I also learned or realized even more when reading the Quran. Then I thought that a lot of things are outdated. But when I read the Quran, and for me it was good that I read before a book which explained a little bit the story and history of Islam, so I had some context. But actually also not that much context was needed. So when I didn't understand something, I just researched the context and it made sense. So there were not this extreme verses in there which I thought I will find, or this extreme punishment and this and that. No, it was just like logical common sense in here and nothing extreme like I thought I would find in there. So yeah, really common sense, really it tells you to be a good person, to do good things. And then I thought to myself, how can it be wrong to do the right things? Because what is in here, what is said in here, those are clearly the right things. No one can argue that. Maybe not all the judgments or something, but how to live as a Muslim and those things, that makes sense. So how can do the right things be wrong? And the right things that I mean by that are the virtues that are described of a good person, of a good Muslim, to not steal, not lie, not cheat, not murder, not be bad to your wife or your parents, treat them good, to be honest, to not talk bad about other people behind their back, and a lot of things like that, to be humble when things go good, when you make a lot of money, when you have a lot of success, but also to be patient when life is really hard and when you not have anything. That all makes so much sense, and it's stuff we forget a lot in day-to-day life because we are distracted by social media and getting the Lambo and this and that. But yeah, those things are clearly the right things to do and the things that lead to a good life, a good society. And that's what really amazed me. Also a couple other things where my mindset changed and which I learned from reading the Quran. Number one, before I thought a lot that, okay, if this is true and God and good and evil and this and that, why bad people get so much reward at some times? Why the world doesn't make sense? And the Quran explains, hey, look, that's purpose, okay? The world is on purpose, built like that it's not so clear to see that. Sometimes bad people get reward, sometimes good people get punished. Because if it would not be like that and everything would 100% be clear, then belief wouldn't even matter. And that's also an example which is mentioned in here. When people basically die and get resurrected before God, they will say, yeah, we believe in you, God, and we believe in the day of judgment and everything. But then it's already too late because it's already obvious. And only if it's a little bit confusing, you can separate the people who really believe or the people who just believe because it's comfortable for them. So if, for example, it would be clearly that only if you do good deeds and do good things on the world, then you get worldly reward, then the people who do good deeds, they would probably do it just because to get the rewards and not because they believe that it's important to do the right things instead of the wrong things, that they believe in Allah. And that's the thing I understood. And one last thing which changed a lot for me is that the Quran says, or the story how Satan was created. This was really interesting for me, because before I thought like, okay, there's like God and there's Satan and they are like fighting, or good and bad is fighting in the world. That's what my belief system was before. But no, God has all the power. If he wants to destroy Satan, he can do it with a snap of a finger, or just by saying be, and it would be like that. He has all the power, but there's wisdom in it, which is exactly what I mentioned before, that only through that confusion you can filter and you can see who's really a believer and who not. And there's basically the story of Ibis, which was before a jinn, and he then did not prostrate before the first human. So he didn't show respect because he thought he's better and he had a big ego. And then he got punished and he got thrown out of the heavens of paradise. And then he basically asked God, hey, prolong my punishment until the day of judgment, and I for sure will do everything to lead humans astray, because I was led astray. That's basically more or less what he says. And he makes it his mission to, as long as humans are on the earth before the day of judgment, to try everything to lead them into a bad direction, to make them disobey God. And how he does it is by whispering, and that's also what we all experience, that sometimes you know it's not right to do that, but you have this voice in your ear, it's okay this time, blah blah. And the more you lean into that, the more you will go down a road which leads you to hell, essentially. And the more your heart will close, and the more you lean into the other way, which is to listen to God, to follow his teachings, the more your heart will open and the more you will receive, the more guidance you will receive. And that's something I can for 100% say is true, and I experienced that in my life. If you have some times where you more go into this ignorant direction, it becomes worse. And if you have some times where you really open, you really try to be a good person, it comes better and better, and you feel it. And it's like a ripple effect, essentially. So yeah, I think those are the main things I learned. Of course, you can't summarize this book in a short video, but just how my mindset changed. So yeah, that's it, I think, for this video. I hope it was interesting to watch, and yeah, see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.